for me personally, it was really hard being a solopreneur and doing everything and not having anyone to turn to. Like I didn't hire my first employee until like 3 years in, really. So I would go, like I had a cookie dough company. I would go to the kitchen for like 10 hours, screw on hundreds of lids until my hands bled, and then put them all in my Jeep and then drive home to my condo, put them in a wagon, bring them to my fridge in my condo, put them in my condo, eat dinner at like 11 or 12 at night, and then do it all again the next day. And I think the emotions were exhausting, but then also physically it was just draining for me. And the thing that I didn't do early on enough was have a support system in place. Like I didn't have a mentor, I didn't have advisors or friends who were entrepreneurs. I was just very isolated, and all my friends, like my real life friends, not virtual friends, all worked for the government. So I would come to them with my problems and they're like, sorry, like let's drink or let's have a good time.
MyCore is on a mission to be the world's most people-centric company. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the core of people. I'm your host, Nathan Bourne, and I invite you to join me as we deep dive into the personal and professional lives of our guests. We're going to learn who they are, why they exist, and what they do. We're going to hear their stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. In other words, we're going to talk to some really cool people. Welcome to the MyCore podcast. Hello, everyone. I am super pumped to be here. I'm feeling a little bit lonely here in my studio because I typically do these episodes in person, but I am going to be accompanied today by Erica. Hey, Erica.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Erica and I connected through Pierce. Pierce was on episode or conversation 003. This is now Convo 011. And Ma, you have a really powerful story, and I am excited to talk to you about all the things today.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It's going to be good.
Yeah, where to start? So you are Canadian.
I am Canadian.
By birthright, you were born in Canada but live in Texas?
No, I do not live in Texas. We can't say that. I'm visiting Texas. Yeah. So I'm in Austin right now. I came here for like 4 months, and then I'm driving back to like Toronto, Niagara area next week.
Cool. For Christmas, I presume.
For living.
For good. Okay. So your season's concluding.
I'm scattered. Yeah, coming to America and staying in America is hard for a Canadian, is what I've learned. So there's lots of red tape.
I see. Like you said that very specifically. like if people are listening, you're like, I don't live here. I'm visiting.
Yeah, no, because I can't get punished for coming here and saying, you know, I got to be careful. But,
for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm an ignorant American that just goes state to state and doesn't even think about it. But yeah, what are the time frames that you're allowed to be here?
You can come for 6 months and then you have to leave, or you can extend it 6 months. But then if you do that and you leave, you can't come back for 6 months, if that makes sense. Yeah. So there's like all these weird rules, and I didn't really know until I got here. And I'm like, I'll figure it out when I get here. And then, 6 months kind of comes and goes pretty quickly. So yeah. So I'm going home, and then I'm going to figure something out. But
yeah, you'll figure your next move. The first time I met Canadians or Canadian people, I was so confused because I just assumed this was like I was in college, and my buddy and I, we went to different schools, but we would take our finals and then we would get on a plane and we would go surf for like a month with just our backpacks and surfboards. And we did it in Mexico and Costa Rica. And, you meet a lot of Canadians when you're kind of backpacking and doing the hostels. And this is so ignorant of me, but I just assumed that they would be like so different. But I was like, but you're not American? And they're like, no. And I'm like, but like, you really look like you're American and talk like you're American. And obviously there's all kinds of differences and nuances. But I think at this point, like, we should probably just join forces. I feel like they should open the border that way.
I know.
Like, it's like not a big deal that you're here, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's a whole thing. Like, I guess Donald Trump met with Justin Trudeau and he proposed that Canada just like kind of merges with the US. And I don't know. I don't know if that'll be a thing. But we are very similar, to be fair. Like, they're very similar
Right.
countries. We just have a very large country with less population. So you'll have like California's population, but scattered throughout. Like, comparing it, it'd be like, yeah, California all across America,
Across the
right?
whole
Like,
US.
yeah, yeah. So it's just small population wise,
So
but
does that
big.
mean that, I mean, obviously, like I've been to British Columbia and I have
Hmm.
really important people in my life that they're part of my executive team, Ken and Patty. They're in British Columbia. I visited them in 2015, I think. So I haven't actually been there for almost a decade, but it was amazing. I've been to Toronto, but it was like a quick fly in, fly out business thing. And then I went to Montreal like in eighth grade. So that's my
Oh,
experience with Canada. But do most people live in rural areas because there's so much room? Or do people still like birds of a feather flock together and have like booming metropolises?
I think like there's the main cities, like there's Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. Like those are the pockets that are like very densely populated, and then the families and stuff tend to migrate away from the cities and be close enough to like commute in. But like I grew up probably an hour and a bit outside of Toronto with my
Okay.
parents and stuff. So yeah, so like cute little town, 25,000 people by the
That's cool.
lake, like small town vibes, Hallmark
Yeah.
movie you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I was gonna say it reminds me of my wife and I. We were watching, like Lindsay Lohan's on a tear right now with these
I
movies.
watched that movie, whatever it was called, I forget.
Our Little Secret or whatever. It
Yeah, yeah,
was good, right? I
yeah.
thought it was pretty
She's
good.
good. Yeah, I'm very impressed with her. Like she was out for a bit, but she came back
Yep.
and now she's thriving. So yeah.
Which is really hard to do, right? Like
Hmm.
to be in the limelight, have your moment, particularly like, I mean, speaking of Canadians, you like Justin Bieber or something like
Oh yeah.
these. This is like inhumane. Like nowhere in the human history have we given people this much attention, and I mean maybe the equivalent of like a prince or a princess, but it's pretty
Hmm.
unreal the limelight that like a young person can have due to YouTube or social media, and then they're expected to just like figure out their life on the public domain. Like if I think about my childhood and my adolescence and teenage years, like I don't want anyone to know like the things that I thought or did or said, like embarrassing stuff, even not even like bad, but just like that's embarrassing. So to have to like go rehabilitate and then come back out into the world, that's got to be really hard. I mean, I don't know. I've never been like famous, so I couldn't say, but I think she's doing it. Like I'm like for whatever it's worth, I'm like, get it, Lindsay. Like let's go. I'll watch these movies.
Yeah, for sure. And I know she's remaking Freaky Friday 2 or something with Jamie Lee Curtis, which will be really fun to see because that's like, I don't know, my childhood in a nutshell. Like that was probably like on a loop for
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
Iconic.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that movie. It's so good.
Yeah.
And then Parent Trap is just
Hmm.
undefeatable. Like the best.
Unmatched. Yeah. Yeah.
I saw
So good.
something the other day where I don't know what football team it was, but they did the whole dance. Did you see this?
No,
So
I
you know
didn't.
the scene in Parent Trap when she has like her like handshake slash dance with
Hmm.
the butler.
Hmm.
Two NFL players after scoring a touchdown did the whole thing, like the hand and like
That's
hit
really
the feet.
wholesome.
So wholesome. I was like, that's really good. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and it's like pretty intricate. Like they didn't just like do part of it. They did like because they like rotate when they do it and then kind of like redo it. I mean, it took like a moment. I almost scrolled past it. It took that long to watch. So yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's
enough
awesome.
about
People are great.
Lindsay Lohan. Let's talk about Erica Rankin. So have you always had an entrepreneurial spirit? Like growing up in a in a small town like that is local business and artisans and people being crafty. Like, where did your entrepreneurial spirit come from, you think?
I don't think I had any, maybe, I don't know. I had lemonade stands as a kid, but that was pretty much it. That's like every other kid, you
Yeah,
know?
my kids are like hardcore about them. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was it. I've seen some kids get creative though, and they like have cookies or they have like other things now. But
Bracelets, Pokemon cards,
yeah, they're
pretty
out there
much a yard sale at this
hustling.
point.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. It's very admirable. But I don't know. I think like in 2018 is when I graduated school. So I studied psychology. You know, I was going down the route that everyone goes down and wanted to become a psychiatrist. I was going to go get my master's and my PhD. And then I kind of realized, okay, the system's broken, and the job that I have that I thought I'd be getting compensated well for, I was making less than what my sister was making at a grocery store. And I'm like, this doesn't
Jeez.
seem right. This is broken. This is not what I want to do. And I ended up quitting that because of an entrepreneurship podcast that I listened to called the MFCEO Project back in, it was 2018. And that's when I got exposed to entrepreneurship because my parents were never entrepreneurs. I didn't really have any friends. Growing up in a small town, everyone kind of does the 9 to 5. I also ended up working at that grocery store that my sister worked at, and my best friend and her brother and her mom and, you know, like her boyfriend, like all these people, like small town, you know, like,
Just
you know,
hung out.
it's called the Superstore on Netflix, and it's literally like everyone working at the Superstore. Well, that was us. It was literally called the Superstore. We worked at. And it was just drama. Like everyone knew everyone, and this person slept with this person, and this is just so much drama. But yeah, so that I just decided to quit and go traveling. And then on my trip is when I really got exposed to entrepreneurship. Somehow, by God's grace, I kept bumping into entrepreneurs, and then I learned more about it, and then came home and Googled business workshop near me and then started my first business. So that's where the seed, I guess, got planted. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm always fascinated by how people cross over, to the dark side of the moon with entrepreneurship, because I have a kind of a similar story, but mine makes a little more sense because I grew up in a way that survival was necessary. So we just kind of got scrappy and sold things and like hustled things, and what might have been like sales, I didn't realize was preparing me to be an entrepreneur. And I've been a full blown entrepreneur for 18 years. Like I started my first company while I was in college at 18 years old. So half my life I've been this way. But I'm always amazed by people that maybe didn't have that story, because it's not like you had to do this, right? Like you had education, you could have went the route, your modeling was different. It wasn't like you saw everyone around you owning businesses. So what do you think it is about you that like sparked that? Like, I'm sure you've thought about that. Like, why did I go down that path that's like super unsafe and dangerous and like crazy?
Because I'm crazy. I think that is the answer.
Right?
Yeah. I've always been a very competitive, extreme person. Like if I do something, I'm going to go all in. And I was even like this. And like you hear a lot about entrepreneurs dropping out of school or, failing out or whatever. And that was not the case for me. Like I was keener. Like I kissed ass. I would make my projects look all pretty with fancy borders and stay like in the library until the lights got shut off. Like that's who I was. That's how I operated. And I got into bodybuilding, which is very extreme. So if I like dip my toe into something, I'll just go all the way. So with fitness, I'm like, okay, how can I take this all the way? Okay, like I'm going to be competitive. And then I did that. And then I got curious about entrepreneurship, and I thought, okay, like if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all the way. So then I got into it. And it's one of those things, you get into it and you can't really turn around. Like once you're in it, you're kind of in it, And even now I'm in a place, like a bunch of things happen with the business, obviously. And now I'm in a different business, building something new. But I've always had the thought in my head, like, what would a regular job feel like? Because I've never ever worked in corporate. I've never had a healthy salary or benefits. Like, I don't even know what that tastes like. I don't know what it
Right.
looks like to work with a team, like with good company culture. I don't know what that feels like. So it's always kind of like a thought that's in the back of my mind. Like, it's there, if you
Right.
want it, you can go for it. But, you're going to have to sacrifice A, B, C, D. You're not going to have the freedom and flexibility. It's not going to be as fulfilling.
Right.
So there's pros and cons, I think, to everything for sure.
It's interesting. I think I can relate to a lot of that from a personality standpoint and also experience. Like I've never had a job, and I am that person that dropped out of an Ivy League school for entrepreneurship. So I can relate to the risk that you take. And a lot of times I think people that are like normal or healthy or whatever, it's like they think it's crazy. And then this is for me, I'll speak for myself. I'm curious if you would concur. So I'll do things, and then people that are much more prudent, much more stable, like human beings. I married one, right? My wife will be like, the F, like they're just like, why did you do that? Or how did you do that? And then in my mind, I didn't consciously think of it that way. Like, it wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm going to take a bunch of risk right now and I'll figure it out. It's like, I was just doing it, and then I like look back and I'm like, oh, damn. Yeah, I guess I did do that. Right. So in a way, I think it's sort of like, are entrepreneurs made? Are they born? There's this trait that you have to endure long enough. And most people will not take on that pain for that long because it is brutal, right? Like, it is an excruciating, dark, cold abyss. And the worst part is, while you're in that hole, you have to be public in everything you're doing, right? So you're going on podcasts, you're networking, you're building the brand, you're sharing with the team, you're championing, and you are in like no man's land while you're hiding in plain sight. Can you identify with that or like relate to that?
Yeah. And you also have to pretend that everything's okay when it's not. And it's like, it just becomes exhausting. And it's hard because for me, like, my whole brand is authenticity. And there's a fine line between, like, you have to show up in the business as
Right.
a leader, and then, as showing up as yourself. And like, it's hard, like, you can't just like walk in and be like, everything is falling apart. Like, we lost so much money this month and we're filing bankruptcy, because that was my reality. That was my life. And I just had to pretend things were okay. And you also, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, there have been times where I literally thought I was going to lose everything in the blink of an eye. And then the next day it's like, oh, actually you're fine. You're good. You got a listing. And you're like, oh, okay, we're good. And then,
Right.
You're on your way and you're good. And then all of a sudden, like, something else tragic happens. And it's just like, it's compared to whack-a-mole. It's like these things just like keep popping up and you keep smacking them down. And then you're like, okay, I'm good. And then like 5 pop up all at the same time. And you're like, okay, I was not prepared for that, but we're going to figure it out. And I think, going back to your point of reflecting on the things that you did and kind of being like, oh, wow, I actually did that. Like, you have to move quickly sometimes. And I don't think you can fully like process what's happening. You're just like, okay, well, I have to do this. I have to go through and do this right now. And if I don't, then XYZ is going to happen. So, and then I look at that too. And I'm like, holy shit, all of the things that I did and I went through the past few years, like, sometimes you don't know how you did it, but you did it because you had to figure it out. Yeah.
I want to keep talking about this because I have thoughts. I have thoughts on it, and I think insights, and I think you will as well, because so there's risk, right? But I think a lot of times people will associate risk with like losing something that you have, because that just makes sense, right? Like, oh, you're risking this thing you have, right? And it could be removed from you, it could be taken from you. But the most dangerous, and I mean this as a double entendre, right? The most lethal entrepreneurs sort of have nothing to lose while they have everything to lose, like all at the same time. So for example, I don't gamble, right? I turned 18 my freshman year of college. I graduated kind of young. I was a freshman. I'm wrestling at the University of Pennsylvania. I buy a lottery ticket, scratch ticket. I do not win any money. And I was like, well, that was a waste of $1, and growing up a poor kid, I was like, damn it, like that's $1. I could have, used that.
It's a coffee.
So, yeah. Right. Like I've never gambled since then. That was like my one experience in gambling on my 18th birthday. So I would tell people this, like, oh yeah, no, I don't gamble. Like, or do you want to play cards? Do you want to go to the casino? I'm like, I'll go. Like, but I don't gamble. It just does nothing for me. And then I had someone say once to me, it's a friend's father. He was like, and I actually knew him from my wrestling background. He's like, well, you gambled everything. He's like, you went all in on my core. And I was like, oh shit, you're right. Like I really did gamble a lot and, anteed up like hugely. So there's just sort of this like mentality I think you have to have where you are solving problems for the day, but because it's such a roller coaster, if you dwell on the fact that like it could all go sideways and you'll just be assed out, I think it'll just be crippling. Like you wouldn't move forward. You would just like freak out, right? And on the flip side, if you ride those waves too much, like the people around you will lose their mind, right? Because most people don't have the tolerance for that emotional rigor that it requires. So you have to, I think the really hard thing is you have to act like you have it together. Not because like everything's great and like, oh, we're killing it or like the money's right, but just emotionally. You have to be emotionally stable when shit's like swirling. And I think that's probably an incredibly underestimated aspect of entrepreneurship that going into it, I don't know that anyone could prepare you for that. And that's like where the rubber meets the road, is when you are dealing with like 7 fires at once. You have to put them out, at least 5 of them, because 2, you're like, fuck it. Like they're just going to burn, like whatever. But you have to be even keeled, or at least like this, because if you're spiking and plummeting, I mean, nobody's going to follow that. They're going to be like, I can't with this. Mm-hmm. Can you like relate to some of that in the journey and development of your business and your just like entrepreneurial capabilities?
Yeah, 100%. And I think for me personally, it was really hard being a solopreneur and doing everything and not having anyone to turn to. Like I didn't hire my first employee until like 3 years in, really. So I would go, like I had a cookie dough company. I would go to the kitchen for like 10 hours, screw on hundreds of lids until my hands bled, and then put them all in my Jeep and then drive home to my condo, put them in a wagon, bring them to my fridge in my condo, put them in my condo, eat dinner at like 11 or 12 at night, and then do it all again the next day. And I think I like the emotions were exhausting, but then also physically it was just draining for me. And the thing that I didn't do early on enough was have a support system in place. Like I didn't have a mentor, I didn't have advisors or friends who were entrepreneurs. I was just very isolated, and all my friends, like my real life friends, not virtual friends, all worked for the government. So I would come to them with my problems and they're like, sorry, like let's drink or let's have a good time. Or like I ended up I hired my one friend who helped me in the kitchen, and I would just pay him on the side, and he would come in and he's like, oh yeah, I think I want to start a business. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then a few days into him helping me, he's like, fuck that, I'm not doing this. he's like, I don't know how you do this. He's like, I just want to be lazy and work and collect my bill and have my weekends to myself. Because he didn't really see, like he just saw the surface level of what I was doing. But then now, like when he was in the kitchen, screwing on lids, mixing flour, loading up my car, unloading my car, he's no, absolutely not. Can't do this. So Yeah, I think you have to learn how to control all of it and then also just have people that you can talk to. Cause I think if you're just trying to do it all yourself, like that kind of layers into another problem, which is founder syndrome, where I thought I could do everything the best. And then I was getting physically burnt out because I was trying to do everything. And you can't do everything. And you also can't grow a business on your own, too. Right.
Right. Yeah. It
Yeah.
has its limits, like not just mentally and emotionally, but like it physically won't happen. Like you will not scale
Mm-hmm.
it. You will not grow it. It will not be profitable. That's what I think is such an interesting paradox, because to be a founder, you have to be really bold, right? Even if you're not like outspoken or your personality is not, like bubbly or effervescent or borderline obnoxious, like, and yet you have to be, it's like you have to be big and small at the same time. And it's the hardest thing to do, right? Because you're like, well, I got to like put myself out there and I've got to be bold and I've got to cut through the noise. But then I also have to be like humble and serve others and make it about them and not me. So you're in this constant pendulum of like big shit popping, little shit stopping, like big shit popping, little shit stopping. You're just like which one? So I think outlets and having ways to be big and like expand are really healthy, because but if you get obsessed with that limelight, or you only live there, nobody will follow you. Nobody will journey with you, because they're going to be like, dude, you just soak up all the air in the room, or you just soak up all the limelight. So it's such an interesting balance. Like I think about like kind of like we're talking about like famous people, right? So as an entrepreneur, you could almost be associated with that, like, oh, you're wanting to, be rich and famous or something. But what you don't think about is like the person that owns the production company, or like who founded Hallmark or Netflix to even put a platform together for Lindsay Lohan to do her thing. You know what I mean? Like that person is the real G, because no one even knows who they are. And they had to do all the shit, and then they don't even get like the attention for it. So it's this really weird balance of recognizing that you have to get out of the way and be like behind the scenes, but you can't just start behind the scenes. You have to like go up to the front of the stage, crush it for a while, and then work your way like back into the audience and like fade into the distance. So it's not for the faint of heart, right? Like it is not. I respect your friend, because most people will not have the guts to just admit that, especially not within like 72 hours. So they just pretend. And I think now with social media and like Spotify and the internet and just like all the ways that you can like pop up a business, it's kind of easy to call yourself like a business owner or an entrepreneur. But it's like, are you really a bona fide? Because if you're not spending hours like screwing tops and, having to get it to the fridge because it's a perishable, like, are you really an entrepreneur? So I find that kind of interesting too, where a lot of people that I think are entrepreneurial call themselves entrepreneurs. And it's like, you have the adjective, but you are not the noun. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that does make sense. I don't think people understand. And I mean, I was one of these people too, I'll be honest. I didn't realize how hard it would be. I thought it was going to be easy. Not easy, but I thought it was going to be easier.
I got
And I think when you have that mentality and you're telling yourself, oh, this is going to be easy, and then hard shit keeps happening every day, then it makes it even more challenging, because you're like, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? Like, this isn't meant for me. This is the worst thing I've ever done. Why the fuck am I doing this? I mean, I say that all the time still to this day. I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this?
For sure. Like WTF all day.
Yeah. But now I think I've just gotten used to being like, okay, every day there's going to be something that happens. And if there's a day that something doesn't, that's really cool. But that's not going to be the common case, like it's not the reality of entrepreneurship. Like you're literally in the business of solving problems. That's just what it is.
That's what you do.
So, yeah.
So let's get in. I want to get into your story around the bankruptcy, because that's juicy. That's some tea right there. So you're saying you started this business it's called dough, bro, right?
Bro dough. Yeah.
Bro dough. Okay.
Bro
No,
dough. Yeah.
my bad.
Close
bro,
enough.
bro dough.
Bro dough. Yeah.
And like, what inspired that thought? Like, what were you thinking? What were you
Yeah.
thinking, Erica? Yeah.
I honestly, I did no research about the industry. I didn't know anything. I just had a dream like
Just went
anyone
for
else.
it.
And I mean, every day when someone comes to me and they're like, I want to start a food business, I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't start a food business.
Don't
Maybe
do
20
it.
years ago, but
Right.
not to
Run.
crush anyone's dream who's listening to this, but unless you have a lot of money, then go for it. But yeah, you cannot bootstrap a food business. So in 2018, I competed in bodybuilding and I would like manipulate my favorite recipes into like healthier ones. And one of these recipes was these like protein cookie dough bites.
Okay.
And I posted them on my food page and they would get like thousands of comments. And that was the recipe that always popped off. And people would message me asking if I would sell them. And I'm like, that's so weird. No, I'm not selling them.
Right.
This is my fun thing that I do.
Yeah.
And after I went to Asia and I came home and I wanted to start a business, I asked myself, like, what is something that people want? What am I good at? And what does the market need? Like, those were the three questions. And it kind of came back to, oh, these cookie dough bites, like they're not in grocery stores. They're not common. People want them. I enjoy making them. So let's do it. And then I had to come up with a name. So I was going to call them Pro Dough, like protein dough. But then I realized, trademarked. So I had to look at like a trademark search. You know how many times people told me like, oh, you should have named it Pro Dough. I'm like, I was going to.
Right.
I was going to.
But someone beat me there.
Yeah. And then Bro Dough just kind of stuck and it was fun. And then I kind of ran with it and built it over like 4.5 years and took it from my apartment to mass producing it and having it in stores across Canada. And then I filed for bankruptcy, I think on April Fool's. So that's how it all went down.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
You seem to be something I've found in my journey and in having conversations with other people and just sort of being a student of the craft. You really have to recognize the narrative aspect of it all. And you don't want like delusions of grandeur, right? Where you're like, oh, on my Netflix special, it will. But there has to be this sort of element of like, what chapter of the story am I in? What season of the story am I in? And I think you have to look for like ironies or like kind of laughing moments, like April Fools. Like that would be funny if they made a story of my life, like that I filed for bankruptcy on April 1st. Like, of course that would happen. So I think people that kind of understand the arc of their life and story, whether it's, just their personal story or their entrepreneurial story, they're conscientious of that. Like they're looking for those moments, almost like you're scrapbooking or, stringing together. And I think that's what content creation is so cool about. Like I have 5 children, right? So I think about the fact that, over time, if I will eventually pass away. It's kind of interesting because we grew up where it's like, look at this one picture of my grandfather, or like, look at this one, like, I think it's him, but there'll be like insane amounts of content out there that people could be like watching episodes from and be like, look, this is my grandfather in the 2020s, So it's almost like you have to have a mindset for that, because if you don't care about your story, then how could anyone else care, right? Like you have to be, like people be like, Nathan, you laugh at your own jokes. I'm like, well, like, yeah, because I think I'm funny, like I'm like customer number one, like, and then everyone else has to like get with it. So I just wanted to commend you for that, just from the content that I was looking at this morning and just having this conversation with you, even up to this point. I can tell that you don't take yourself too seriously and you kind of see it as like part of the story. I sometimes find that is like an out of body experience where you'll feel like you're playing a character, and that's really hard to find the authenticity in that, because you're like, I wake up every day and I play this character and it's like mainly me, but it's not all me. And I think that's something to grapple with too, where you start to build this person that is required to do the job. And sometimes you can lose yourself in that. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, another piece of it too is when you're building a business, you have to make so many sacrifices. So, all the things that you loved and cared about, and including people too, like they kind of do have to take the back burner and you do have to prioritize the business and you can lose yourself. You can lose your identity. And one of the hardest parts of my journey and closing the chapter of Brodo was my identity. Like I
Right.
used to brand myself as the cookie dough girl, and I have like the founder story. So I didn't have a big marketing budget. I didn't have a team like producing content for me, and I had to get scrappy. So I put everything out there. Like I shared the journey, and then in that I built this really loyal following. And so I was always like one with the business. It was
Right.
like Erica and Brodo, Erica and Brodo. And I think the problem that I had is like I had like the business was here, but then the operations was like down here. Like I had the visibility, but then I didn't have the back end to support it because it was a refrigerated product. And I remember getting, you know, millions of views from people in the US who couldn't even purchase it. And that was like a huge gap that I struggled with. But I was putting out all of this content, and like me and the dough were one. So, and then when I
Right.
closed it, I closed the
Yeah.
business. I'm like, what do I even like to do? Like I had more time on my hands. I went through a huge crisis. Like I went to Mexico and did ayahuasca with 20 people that I never met. Like I was literally
You're
at the
soul
end of my
searching.
rope. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know who I
That's
am.
like
I
a
went for
low
a
point and a high point, like all at the same time. Yeah.
I know. I went for a 12-hour walk with a journal, and I think I did like 60 or 70,000 steps because it's called the 12 walk challenge. But I just, no music, no nothing. And you just like
Just
whatever comes
raw
out of your
dogged
brain, you
it.
just raw dog. You know, like the flights, they're like, oh yeah, I just raw dogged like a
Like
7-hour
just
flight. I'm
staring
like,
at the screen.
try doing a 12-hour walk. You know, like I had to crawl home. Like it's actually walking for that long is very difficult, I will say.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's all to say. I think you do lose a piece of yourself, and I think it is hard. And I think that's why it's so important to like be good at time management and still take care of you and make sure you're still your own person outside of your business. Like you're more than just what you do
Right.
and the role and the title you have, right?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's so important. I agree. So one of our core values, we have three core values: walk by faith, lead with who, and measure what matters. So these are kind of my magnificent obsessions. Like I'm constantly wrestling with what it means to walk by faith and not by sight, and what it means to lead with who, and what it means to measure what matters. And I've found this sort of like trifecta or trinity that they keep me like balanced. They keep me on track, individually and like collectively, because you know the company's grown now. We've got a team of about 50 people. So and we're all distributed. So you know I'm here in my little office studio, but I have people in the U.S. and Canada that I have to connect with regularly and mainly virtually. So I say all that to say that within kind of the lead with who value and thought process, it's difficult because you almost have to create this like Venn diagram where there's like the company, there's you, and then there's like the combination thereof. And if those lines bleed too much, your strength becomes your weakness because your identity is so wrapped up in the business that you don't really know how to be apart from it. And if that were to no longer be operating because there's more money going out than coming in, you know, it's a pretty simple formula. It's dauntingly simple. You know, you need more money coming in than going out, right?
Yeah.
But how do you do that, right? With especially overhead and expenses and all the challenges. But the same way your finances can get commingled, right? You have to build these like disciplines where you say like, wait, I'm not getting gas, or I'll put it this way. Like if I'm getting a meal with my family and it's genuinely not business, I will pay with my personal card, right? Because it's not like I could be fine, but the IRS is not going to like, no, you know what I mean? And ask my wife, I'm probably going to talk about business, like it's going to come up on our date night or with the kids. Like it's there, it lives and breathes rent free. But I've had to build these disciplines to be like, no, that's personal and that's business. And those boundaries can really help from like a tactical standpoint, like with the IRS, but more so you can then go like, okay, I can be this part of me, and it's not the brand, it's not the business, I'm not trying to like advance anything. I'm just being this person. And then you can tease out parts of it and splice it into it. But I think when that commingling occurs, it's like an enmeshment of emotions between both entities, because a real business becomes an entity. It's like a being. It's a brutal process to like decouple that. And it sounds like you're in a journey where your strength maybe became your weakness because you like identified with the story, you were the brand. And that's awesome, because then people didn't really care so much about the product. They follow you, right? They dig you. So you have to kind of go through this like reinvention process and figure out how to monetize it and make it so that you're not back at the grocery store, But yeah. I just am curious, like if that resonates with you as far as your journey, because it sounds like you've been in like this soul search where you're like, shit, I did this great thing. The numbers didn't work out, but I'm still this person. Do I keep going into another venture? How do I reset all the optics? I mean, that's got to be pretty interesting in this moment that you're in, because it's relatively fresh, like April of this year, right?
Yeah.
I know I just said a lot, but yeah. I don't
know.
Yeah.
No, it does hit for sure. And I'm still in this transitional period, and I'm someone who like I move with intention and I move quickly. And this year has been crazy. I'm still trying to figure it out, truthfully. But I hired a business coach, and he asked me, he's like, what would you do if I gave you a glass of water that had a bunch of like dirt and sand on it? Like, how would you make it clear? And I thought about it and I said, oh, you would just dump it out and get new water in it. Like, that's the solution. He's like, no, that's great. But no, like you just let everything settle. You just leave it and you let it settle, and then you can see through it. And that was kind of how I felt for like even a few months after closing the business, is like all of these emotions, like that was the sand and all this dirt and stuff. And I couldn't think clearly. Like I couldn't think logically because my emotions were still so like mixed up and fresh, and I didn't give myself time to really like process things. I just wanted to move through onto the next chapter. And I had this like very manic day where I built out this whole new agency model. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be called Your Branding BFF. I rebranded my LinkedIn, I announced it and everything. And then the next week I'm like, what am I doing? I don't want to do this. And then I deleted all of it and went back, and then I like posted on LinkedIn and was like, I'm just kidding, guys. Like, I'm sorry. I felt like an idiot.
Control Alt.
I know. So, and I think I've done this like 3 or 4 times this year, truthfully, is I think I have something figured out, and then I go, and then it's like, no, that's not actually it. So I think giving yourself time to just mourn and like process things and be okay with being in the in-between seasons is so important, because I think if you rush something, you're going to get into something that's not fulfilling, and it's not going to be your next thing, and you're just going to be in this cycle of like rinse repeat, like trying different things, and it's very unfulfilling, and it's very confusing, and can make you very angry too. And I'm still trying to figure out like, okay, what do I really love? Like at the end of the day, what do I want to do? And I think I need to focus more on the why, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, I want to help people. I want to inspire people. And the vehicle to get there might change a few times. But I think as long as my destination is consistent across the board, then I can kind of figure out what I want to do to get there. But that's in summary, yes, it's hard. And I have had so many crises this year where I'm just like, who am I? I don't know.
You're kind of like plucking the cords of some things that I had to learn. And interestingly enough, I was exactly your age when I say like I'm like this old man or whatever, but it was just like right about turning 30 that I was in a similar state. Like my core was founded October 2nd of 2018. My birthday's October 21st of 88. So I turned 30, like right when I was establishing the company. And what that value, lead with who, it's really important. Like, this is just, world according to Nathan, but I'm going to share it with you and people listening. And it might encourage you for whatever it's worth, unsolicited advice here. I had read, consumed, surrounded myself with, I'd been in environments where the why was often talked about. I would even say like sensationalized. And I struggled with it because I was like, I don't know that that's the real core of it. Like, I don't know that that's the anchor. I know it has its place. So I went on this, like, I didn't do the ashwagandha or whatever it's, or not, what is the ayahuasca. Yeah. Ashwagandha is good. I think it's like a
a daily supplement.
Yeah, like I think I actually take that. So I didn't do the lion's mane, but no, I didn't go like, I didn't have any stimulants, but you'd have thought I did because I kind of went to this like place that was like probably a little manic, but a little bit like trippy, because I was like, I really want to crack the code on this. So I took some time and just processed and meditated on it. And then I'm like, I felt like a beautiful mind. I'm like drawing these like, like equations and visuals and everything. And what ended up coming out of that was this simple graphic, this simple, like you could do it on a bar napkin. And it's what I've like labeled lead with who. But the basic thought process there that I've found has sustained me or continues to, and others, is that we think the why, the purpose, the cause, the mission will give us the oomph. But if you think about it, like if you were to take a piece of paper or a whiteboard and you just drew like a line and you had a left side and a right side, and on the left side you wrote these really altruistic words like purpose, mission, cause. And then you put on the other side words like agenda, motive, ulterior motive. You'd be like, oh God, like I can't stand being around people that have an ulterior motive or have an agenda, right? But if you think about it, these words are really synonyms. They have a reason why they're trying to maneuver you in that direction or try to position you or get around you or, like manipulate, essentially. And I thought, like, this is not going to be popular, but I think the why is really manipulative. Like, I think that if you try to bring people into your world based on why they should do this, and I know this is nuanced, so it's kind of wordplay, but the key is like leading with who you are. Like, if you genuinely are in existence with another person and there isn't a motive, there isn't a why. Because a why should be like collaboratively entered into, right? Like both parties, for lack of a better term, consensually, should step into their purpose and decide if they're going to do that together. So that's been a big shift for me where I've built this like circle of people around me. And I'm really, really aware, probably too aware of who I allow in my realm. Who I allow in my inner circle. And that's always been my like main focus is who am I and who are we? And who am I and who are we? And who are you? And what's the like collective identity of that? Because what will happen is you'll create like this DNA and it's hardwired like ancestry.com or 23andMe. Like you can't deny it after it builds. And then together you step into the why. And now the cause and the mission and the purpose, and it could be an agenda at that point. You're like, shit, we got to get these things done. This is the direction we're moving, the North Star. And then the what's and the hows and the whens and the wheres, they just sort of ripple from there. And that's how I've operated. And every day I wake up renewed because I'm like, you know what? I get to talk to my people today. And that's the deal. You know what I mean? Like, as long, and then my drive to sustain the company, Erica, is actually to just keep hanging out with these people. Like, it would be so sad to me if it crumbled, because the context of our relationship would change. It would be like weird. I'd be like, why am I talking to this person now? You know, or so that's food for thought, I guess you could say, as you're in this journey and process. Because I mean, I listened to 2 episodes, scrolled through, watched a few short form things, and was like, Erica's a force, dude. Like, when she figures out who the hell she really is, she's going to be unstoppable. So I just wanted to encourage you in that, because I think that's what I see you're on, is you're getting to the core, right? You're unbecoming these things that are externally you, and getting to like the essence of who you are. And I just think like you're probably like a few little, you know, like a code
Rubik's Cube turns.
yeah, you're just like a few little, like, you're like close, like
Yeah.
you're close.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well,
I didn't, you know, I don't want to like
yeah.
overstep boundaries there, but I just feel like I want to commend you, because when you put out yourself out there, it's freaking hard, right? You're now like sharing your shit, you know, past, present, and then you're like, now I got to deal with that, right? You're like, damn it, I thought maybe I would avoid that, and like, you probably are pretty good at avoiding it, because I'm pretty good at avoiding it. I just fill it up with the next thing that I'm on to. But it sounds like you're really going back right now over the 30 years and like dealing with your shit. And that's building you into this woman, you know, into this person that I think is going to be a force to be reckoned with. And look what you've already accomplished, like, without the goods. You know, you're like putting like kerosene in your engine and still driving forward and still attracting people. If you get like unleaded, unadulterated Erica, like, it's going to be unstoppable.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And everything you talked about with like the who and the why, and that all makes a lot of sense to me. And that's something that I struggled with too. Like, the why the fuck am I doing this? Those questions. It's like, okay, why am I actually doing this? And really thinking about it. And I've struggled with this in like my fitness as well. Like, I've always focused on the result, not the reason. So it's like, okay, why do I want to lose 20 pounds or whatever? Okay, I want to live a long life. I want to feel good. I want to be able to run really far. Like,
Yep.
I think that has changed a lot of things for me, is like focusing on the reason too. Like, quitting alcohol. Like, why am I quitting it? Like, what are the benefits? Like, what long-term is this going to do for me? You know? Because I was someone who got fixated on the result. Like, I want to build like this massive company, and I want to be in every grocery store and every kid's lunchbox. Like, it was crazy, the things but that can only get you so far. Like, you cannot rely on that for motivation. Like, you have to have other things that get you through. Because I think a lot of people pursue entrepreneurship and then they think that they're going to blow up and make like 10 grand their first month, and that's a low month. And then the next month is going to be like double that, and then double that. And they're going to have the car and the house. And it looks like it's really easy the way that a lot of people portray it on social media, but it's all fake, a lot of it. And then when you get into it and you realize how hard it is, and that all the stuff you saw is not realistic, it can be very discouraging. And then you quit because you're not meeting those expectations and all of the things that you're doing it for. Like, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? And it's not gonna fuel you. So yeah, I agree with all of that. It's a very complex, heavy topic to dissect and to understand. And it's different for everyone too. Like, there are some people that can just be very money driven or materialistic driven, and they're successful, and they're just, I also saw, I mean, it's going around, it's like very viral now. Like, Alex Hormozy posted this thing, like talking about like, he sold his company for $250 million, but he didn't go to any weddings for 10 years, no nights out for 10 years, da, 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 da. And I'm like, that sounds very miserable. Like, I don't want that for me. Like, I'd rather make $250K a year and have my life, you know, and go to weddings and be a good friend and have my own identity outside of the business. Cause I think that's, again, when things get really hard, because you're so much intertwined with your company and you put so much of your self into it, right? But yeah, that's like a whole nother thing.
Yeah, that's so important to be aware of. I'm really afraid of or afraid for people. I like Alex or Mosey tip, like generally. I mean, it's relative because like there's like an entire brand of people, bless their hearts, that I cannot stand, that are just like the hustle culture,
Yeah.
linear. I'm like, these people are like borderline rapists, like they're just like mentally raping everyone. As strong as a word as that is, because it is like abuse. Maybe that's a better word. Like it's abusive what they're doing because their whole model is based on an inefficiency. It would be like if the name of your podcast is "You're a Bad Person." like, oh, you know what? I am a bad person, which I do want to talk about, by the way, because I have some thoughts on that and questions around that. But about the title and all that. So, but anyway, yeah. Do you know who Andy Elliott is?
No, I don't. Who is
the
that?
worst? I'm not even going to give him the attention right now. The dude is the worst. Okay, because he just like. He's just used car salesman on steroids. I think he's actually on steroids too, so it's fitting. But yes, no question, sacrifice, like duh, right? I mean, it's going to be this really disproportionate amount of input in the beginning, but it's all for the purpose of this disproportionate output. The problem is if you only define that output by money, then what a limiting barometer to what success can be, right? The Bible says live in the world, but not of the world. And I love that because one, it's difficult because if you're going to like do the world, then there's going to be all these enticements and all this bait and all these temptations that you get wrapped up in. And the only way that I've found I can navigate that is by my identity. Like as a Christian, my identity is in Christ. I'm still a carnal person. You know what I mean? I still see things, hear things, think things. And I'm like, the fuck were you thinking about that for? You know what I mean? Or like, dude, like check yourself, check your heart. But the way to like sustain it, I think, is to reinforce that is not who I am, or that is who I am. So people, I think, get wrapped up in the what's, and then they might dip into the why because it gives them a little extra feeling of altruism and virtue and like, well, look, I'm doing it to help the people. It's like, no. Like, who are you and who are you doing this for? But even more, who are you doing this with? That's incredibly scalable because then at any point, you're going, I'm successful right now. Like the fact that I get to wake up to my wife and my kids and provide for my family and employ these people. Like if my core grows into $1 billion company or it stays as a few $1 million company, I'm successful right now. So I think it's this kind of I am piece too. And I think people that make their money based on saying that you're not enough get this pressure in saying, well, buy my book, bro, buy my course, bro, because if you were enough, you probably wouldn't need it, right? And I really, that doesn't vibe with me. Does that make sense? I'm kind of ranting. I'm just like hot taking.
No, it does. It does make sense. And I think also like what I've learned is success is different for everyone. Like it's subjective, right? And for me, it's evolved over the years. Like it used to be very quantitative. Like it was like, how many followers do I have? What's the number in my bank account? How many stores am I in? Now it's like a feeling to me. Like I describe it as a feeling. It's like, am I fulfilled? Am I showing up and giving my best? Like, am I serving people? Like that's my mission, is to serve others. And I think when you focus on that, then it's a lot more fulfilling than chasing something, because I was chasing things. It was like, okay, 100 stores. I got 100 stores. I'm like, oh, I don't give a shit. Let's get into 1,000.
Right.
Like it was always the next thing. It's always moving. So it's like you could hit like 10 million and then 20 million. And it's like, okay, no, now we got to go for 1 billion. And it's just this needle that's just always moving and you're chasing. And you have to learn how to be happy with where you are. But then also like work towards goals and stuff too. Like there's a balance.
Level up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Get your bread up. Yeah. Like it's a weird tension, right? It's a weird balance. A mentor of mine, he's on our executive team, he taught me years ago. He said, life's a series of contrasts. I was like, it's interesting, right? It's like both of these things coexist, and it's like the tension between them. But I think the way you kind of navigate it is to not to be vanilla or to dilute, but to like swing between the two in enough of a balanced way that the like aggregate is contrasted or balanced. So in other words, like have a moment where you're like, we are going to hit 1,000 stores, or we're going to hit X amount of members, but not because of the number, but because of who do we have to become to attract that level of attention or to attract that level of money. So it's always this who lens, even when it's what based, right? So you're defining the what and how you're going to get there, and you're being logical and tactical and practical, but it's rooted in and infused with like, well, who would we have to be as an organization? Who would I have to be as a leader? I mean, even doing this, right? Like I have a lot of experience prior to digitizing all of it in speaking and training and like all the things, but I didn't bring that into the digital world until like 3 months ago. Right. So it's been like super fresh. That was the name of the store, right? Super fresh. It's been super, super new. So yeah, you can always judge a root by its fruit. And I think it's like, as long as you're going for the fruit, but you're recognizing that it's connected to the root of who you are, then it's like, dude, conquer the world, like, yeah, go out there and crush it so that there's proof when people try to call you on something and you can be like, nah, bro, like this isn't just rhetoric or doctrine. Like it shows up here in these areas of my life, and here's my P&L, and here's, so you got to pull receipts. But if it's just about having the attention or having the output, it's just not sustainable. I think those people just do drugs or something, like, or I don't know how they do. I mean, maybe, but they die early, or so. I don't know how you could possibly get to your deathbed feeling saturated in this thing called life with that mentality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't take the money and all the things with you to when you go, right? Like, I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. And I don't know. I'm now like, I just want to get to a place where I have enough finances to just cover everything. I want to travel. I want to have a couple places in different places. And
right.
I don't know. I don't need to have like all the thing. Like I don't have the big houses and the cars and all that stuff. Cause I think it just, when you get it, it's shiny and it's exciting, but then it just becomes a standard, and then you just want more things. And yeah. And I have like, even this year, I was not I don't like to call like not a religious person, but I never really had a relationship with God until like going through all of this shit. I'm like, I need something. Like,
for anybody alive out there.
I know. Yeah. So it pushed me to like, I was in Death Valley. And I think having that has also just created this whole new level of fulfillment that I've never really had before. Cause I know that like everything's going to unfold the way it's meant to. And it's Godspeed. Like you cannot control things. And it's like squeezing sand. Like the more you try to grip things and control things, the sand is just going to fall out of your hands. And you just have to let go and trust. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. But I think it's normal as a human. You want to be able to control all the things and get all the things on your timeline. And society puts so much pressure on you to have certain things by a certain age. And
and you're learning. So in this new kind of faith walk, you're learning to yield to God's timing and not Erica's timing, like Kairos versus Chronos, right? Like it's not just, I got to have it done by this date or this way. It's like, what is the perfect timing in all of that? That's got to be really challenging and relieving, like all at the same time.
It is, I think, because I'm such a type A person.
Right. Like you're a driver, right? You're like,
I know.
Come on, God.
And even in other areas of my life, like my romantic relationships, and it's not like a lack of try. Like I have tried. I've put myself out there, and I'm just like, I come home every day, and I'm like, do you see me trying? Like, it's not a lack of trying. I'm not just waiting, like peeking through the blinds, waiting for
you're
my
swiping
person
right.
to show.
Like, you're doing your thing.
I know. I'm
you
like,
got carpal tunnel syndrome from it, probably.
I know.
Mainly
So,
this way, probably.
yeah. And church, like the sermon a few weeks ago, they were talking about like a house. So you have like your house, and each room is like represents something different. So one room's like your finances, one room's your career, one room's like your, I don't know, like romantic relationships, whatever.
Right.
And you have
The red
like
room.
certain doors open, but then other doors closed. And like, I think I was trying to like, I'm like, okay, like, you know what? I'll give you the romantic one. Like, you can bring me the love of my life when I'm ready. I trust you, whatever. That's fine. But then like the finances door is closed. It's like, I'm taking care of this. By next month, I'm going to earn X amount of money. I'm going to get this amount of clients. Like, this is on me. I'm going to do this. And I think like you can't do that. You can't just like close the doors and just try to do things on your own terms, because it's going to be frustrating. And when you're not getting the things that you want to get by certain times, like it's going to be hard. And it has been hard for me. And then you get in this place of like defeat, and you're like, why me? And you play victim, and like you can't live life like that. You just have to keep all the doors open, and then maybe you'll wake up one day and there's going to be a brand new bed and couch and
Right.
dresser, and you're like, oh, okay, that only got in here because the door was open. If I had the door closed, I'm in there with a hammer and plywood trying to build it myself.
Right.
It's not working.
Duct taping it all together.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing part about God, is that he's such a gentleman that we have free will, and it's a real free will. Like even in all his power, all his it's like, you do you, boo boo. Like if you, and that's where grace comes in, because we screw it up like perpetually, right? Like we have been since the beginning of the time, we will forever. And it's just sheer grace that keeps us even like in existence. The fact that we haven't like killed ourselves, or, I mean, we're killing each other, right? But it's like, you can do that. Like, that's okay, you know, because that's the deal. Like, that's the deal. Do you? But it's so much richer, I found. And by the way, this is like fresh for me, because I do better than most with controlling my life and keeping it together. But it wasn't really until, like a month ago, that I like fully surrendered and was like, all right, dude. Like, and I was a college wrestler. Like, I am naturally a grappler. Like, it's who I am. My wife, I'm always trying to wrestle her, and she's like, no. She knows how to beat me because she just like plays like a possum. She just doesn't wrestle me back, I'm like, well, this is no fun.
She's got it right. That's how you operate in life. You just dead weight,
play
just dead.
Right. So I had an experience at church recently, and it was a series on the Holy Spirit. And there's a lot more to it, but the short version was just like a moment where I'm like, okay, like I can't anymore. Like I just can't anymore. And the way I've thought it in like my mind's eye is that I've always been in the driver's seat of my life, which there's great reward for that. And people will be impressed by it. They'll be like, man, you really like take care of your shit, and you kind of have it together, and you are, self-driven and made and all the things. But I've kept God like passenger, like, dude, play any music you want. Like, we'll go to the drive-thru. You can order like over me. Like, I won't even try to order for you. Like, the glove box is there if you want to like recline. I mean, if I like am not paying attention, and Jesus take the wheel, if you want to like grab it to save us from hitting somebody. So like, I've always had God as a co-pilot, but I just finally got to a point where I'm like, you drive, man. Like, you be the pilot. I'll be the co-pilot. I mean, I might even go take a nap in the back. Look, you can tie me up and duct tape me and put me in the trunk. I'm done doing this thing. And so many things have been unlocking since then, like in these really cool, only God ways. And it's like, I just have so much more peace than I did. And then like actual things are happening, like outputs that you're like, oh, I was really trying hard to make that happen. It's like, dude, I already won that battle for you. Chill. So it is an interesting journey to to give your life up and kind of like have someone else be in the driver's seat. Is that part of what you're experiencing in this new? Because I saw in one of your videos that you've gotten baptized recently. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I got baptized when I was really young, like a baby, and I didn't remember. And we didn't go to church. Like I used to make jokes like if I stepped into a church, it would burn down. Like that was, I'm like I'm too far gone, girl. Like I'm gone. I'm I'm a sinner. But yeah, I never really understood it, and never really had good experiences with religion growing up. Just through friendships and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's funny, like when I drove to Texas and I'm like, why did I come here? It was just placed on my heart and it's like, go to Texas, I'm like, okay, so
Holy
I drove
Spirit.
here.
Yeah.
I know. I drove here and it's funny, like the second I crossed into the state, my Bluetooth wasn't working and my aux wasn't working. And then the radio was playing worship music. And it was just a random station that was on. And I started listening to it and I'm like, I'm kind of vibing with this.
Yes, you got hit with some K-love.
I know. And then I'm like crying in my car and I'm like, what am I doing? Am I just really tired? We're on hour, like, I don't know, 10, like it's driving through. And yeah. And then I had a friend message me and they're like, you have to check out this church. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to do that. And then I went in and I don't know, like the first time I ever walked in and heard the sermon and just like felt the music, it was just something I've never experienced before. And I'm like, beautiful. I think this is like where I'm meant to be. And I came here for this exact reason and ended up meeting a girl the day that I got baptized. She got baptized in front of me and we became really good friends. And I think there's just a reason for all of it. But yeah, it was a very emotional moment. I didn't think it would be as emotional as it was, but it felt like a clean slate and yeah, it felt really good. So
yeah, that's so cool. That's really special. I love that. I mean, and that is what it is, right? It's a new creation, and it's this weird phenomenon where you wake up the next morning and you are completely new and completely the same person all at the same time, right? And you're like,
yeah,
oh man. So now it sounds like you're in this journey, what they might call like sanctification or discipleship, refinement. It has like some Christianese that goes with it, but pretty much like brass tacks, you're like over yourself and you're like, I kind of suck, but I'm kind of dope too. So like, how do I keep the dope parts? Like, can I still curse? And it's like, yeah, fucking curse, dude. It's cool. Like, so I have always been like in that realm because if I'm around people that are like super duper Christian, I'm like, ugh, it's like eating vanilla cake all day or something. I'm like, give me some like real carbs of what's going on in the world. So that's really cool that you had that experience because you just strike me as the type of person that if you could have done it any other way, you probably would have by now. Like you don't like avoid trying something or putting yourself out there or sticking your neck out there. So it's probably a bit of like a getting to the end of yourself experience.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't know, even the baptism, I didn't want to do it. I don't know why. There was like this part of me that was like, no, that's weird. Like you're going to go in front of like a room full of hundreds of people and like get dunked in water. That's weird.
It's epic though, right?
It is. So yeah, it was really beautiful. And I think they baptized like over 200 people that weekend or something crazy. And I'm really glad I went. And I think anything that I get curious about, I don't want to not explore it because it's always lingering and it's taking up space in my head. It's like, well, that one church, like, no, like go and see if you like it. And if you don't, then whatever, then don't go. Or maybe go to a different church. Or I'm just like kind of sad because I'm leaving and I don't know if I'm going to have the same experience back home or if I'm going to find the same community or church. I'm sure I will and it'll be fine. But yeah, it's hard when you find things that you love so much and then you have to leave and find replacements like workout studios or gyms or like all of that stuff too,
Totally. My life has been full of a lot of change. So I'm kind of used to things changing, but I've gotten more like routine and like normal. And our gym had like 2 locations and I would always go to the one and then they like consolidated to the other one. And I was like struggling with it. Like, and I was struggling that I was struggling. Like, I was like, bro, you have overcome some pretty crazy shit in your life. Like, and then I realized, like, damn, dude, you're doing it. Like, you're at the point in your life where like a consolidated gym for CrossFit is like an ish. Like, let's go. You know? So it doesn't discount it though, just because, especially if you're like a baby Christian, so to speak, right? Where you're like getting fed and spoon fed in this. It's an important season. When would you say that this happened? Like the moment that you experienced God, were like, all right, I'm in, and then got baptized. Like what's the timeline there?
I think I was like spiritual, like in the early years of entrepreneurship, like probably like 2021 maybe.
Okay.
And I think it just when I was in the depths of hell, basically going through it, I'm like, I need to hold on to something. So,
Right.
But yeah, like I have this little like picture here. I don't know if you can see it. It's like a hand.
Awesome.
But
Does
yeah,
it say something?
No, it's just like a girl and she's reaching up and there's a hand. It's supposed to be God's hand,
Love that.
Like that was me.
So
But
you were in the pit and like
yeah,
drowning, like, I need something here.
basically like grappling almost. But yeah, I think this year has been like the most spiritual year for me. And I've had so many God moments where I'm like, okay, like this is all like this all makes sense and I just need to trust. And it's like the more that I commit or show up to church or like read the Bible or like all these little serendipitous moments happen and I hear things more and there's more clarity around things too, because that's a big thing is like, okay, why am I here? What is my purpose? I'm in this transition season. It's so easy to, I guess, shut off, like not shut off God, but like just put all of that aside when you're in the depth, like building a business and just putting everything into it and you're in the day to day. You don't really take time to just pump the brakes and slow down and be like, hey, thanks for everything. Like I still see you and hear you. Like you're, like I still care. It's, a practice that you have to keep consistent. So yeah, I think every time I've had to slow down, that's when I get in touch with my spiritual side. But I don't know if you're like that. It's hard in the busy seasons and you're kind of like, wow, I was an asshole. I kind of forgot all about you. You like blow the dust off your Bible. Like
Literally, yeah.
where is that thing again?
I think the part that's probably so humbling in all of that is like, here is God, Alpha and the Omega, like has it all, like created it all, manages it all, like complete boss. And somehow he has time to pursue us on an individual basis. Like you would think that it would be like, all right, I'll accept you, come back, right? Like, but he's actually pursuing us. Like he's like, hey, do you want to hang out? Hey, like, how's your day going? He's almost like, bro, did you just double text me? Like, come on. Like, I'm leaving you on
I ghosted
red.
you a year ago and you're still here.
You're still coming at me. Like, like I've left you on red. Like, and yet when we get to those moments, it could be a week, it could be a month for others, it could be years. For me, it was quite some time. You're like, dude, sorry. I mean, like, what was I thinking? And you just get this, I'll get teary eyed thinking about it in this moment because I have these like, and it normally is like you get caught sideways where you're like a song will come on and then you kind of be like, oh shit, dude, I haven't talked to you in like a month, man. Or like a week or like, so it's a really cool and challenging thing because you can't just over spiritualize it. Like as you were sharing, I had this thought and it kind of ties into some of the other things we were talking about, but I don't know, just world according to Nathan. But like I've noticed that a lot of people, one, because they don't want to be offensive, and I understand that it's delicate. Like I say things and am pretty bold in my faith, and I get like a decent amount of flack about it, but it always takes care of itself. Like I'm always like, yo, it's gonna be all right, chill. Like don't worry. But it's a counterfeit. Like spirituality, in my opinion, is like a worshiping of the creation versus the creator. And I think that's the difference. Is it's like, okay, maybe you get out in nature and maybe you meditate, or maybe you have your rocks or gems, or you clear your chakra, and it's like, it's all good. Like I'm here for it. Like, let's go. Like, definitely. Like, I'll do some yoga, like I'm in. But it feels a lot like it's worshiping all the creations, and the miss, in my opinion, is the creator. Like when you are sitting there going like, shit, like you created all of this and you hold it all in orbit with each other, and you still have time to give a shit about me. Damn, you know what I mean? So, and then you have to balance that with the physical and the mental and the financial. It's just that when you get out of whack and you're like, I'm obsessed with my caloric intake and I have to, then you're like, dude, like that's just one piece of the pie. But also you can't be living your 600-pound spiritual life, So like it's really quite a balancing act. But does that make sense to you? Like kind of the creator versus the creation?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I don't know, I was doing all those things. Like I was meditating, going to yoga and trying all these things, but I never really seeked God, or I never really understood it. And I also felt super awkward. I'm like, I feel kind of dumb doing this. Like this is weird. And I didn't really have that many Christian friends, or I had spiritual friends, but more so on like the woo woo side. So like when I went and did, because this is controversial too to Christianity, right, going and doing ayahuasca, like that's a thing that's like, no, you don't do that really. And when I went, like a lot of the people there were telling me like, oh, God is not what we think it is. There's like all these galactic like beings in the sky. And I was like, this is weird. I don't know. It was very interesting. So I had this like, I kind of got exposed to everything this year, and I'm like, this is where I'm meant to be. This is the relationship. Because it's not, I like relationship over the word religion, because religion can, people just like I had someone comment and be like, oh, so now you're a part of a cult. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, that's not at all what I'm doing. Like, have you ever been to a church? Like, no. Like the Bible is the best personal development book on the planet,
Literally, right.
And and I think people that don't, and I was one of them too, like I thought like, oh, like they're culty. And I also have a very extremely religious aunt, and I've only ever seen it to like that level. And I'm like, well, God, like I do not want to become any shape or form like that. Like I don't want to be that intense where I'm pushing stuff on people, or like I want to incorporate God into my life and have a healthy relationship with him and live to a higher standard and make him proud and make myself proud. And it's like a compass. I just feel like I have more direction now since I've stepped into this, and it feels good. And also it's nice to hang out with other people who have similar beliefs as you, and you can bond over the same thing, right?
Right. And recognize that it's like, it's not all pretty, So what typically will happen is, this is how I have described it. You're living in darkness. You don't realize it's darkness because there's a lot of great things about life that you can enjoy that are, enjoyable, pleasurable, and even wholesome, right? Like it's not just all like, oh, sex, drug, and rock and roll. It's like, no, just like nice things that are just fine. A good cup of coffee or conversation or whatever. But it's still darkness, like at the core, and like the way the construct is set up. Like one thing that just helps me is to think of it like an epic story that is like, this isn't just like your interpretation or your participation. It's like, this is happening. Like this actually happened. Like there's a dude. His name is God. He had a son. His name is Jesus. You know what I mean? He came to earth about 2000. Like when you put it into like facts and not like just fantasy, it can help you kind of wrestle with it all and reckon with it all. So that still takes a huge exercise of faith, because people will try to challenge those things, scientifically or historically or whatever, right? But if you kind of start with the basis of like, okay, I'm going to believe this to be true factually, knowing that man has construed it and then tried to, screw it up. But within that construct, within that like story, we are part of it because he chose us as like the main thing that he's going to communicate the world and the way and like all the things. Like we're the like premier creation. And I think that we sometimes just put ourselves in these like godlike complexes because we really are made in his image and we get to co-create with God and we get to be sort of God-like. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with like the complexes around being a founder or owning a business or having a brand. As you get into this kind of like larger than life flow, and if you're not careful, you'll start just being your own God. And that's where I think the creator versus the creation comes in, because you end up worshiping yourself or you worship each other. And it's really, really dangerous because it's like it's a super close second, you know, like you could do it in like a really unhealthy way where it's like you're idolizing a person, you know, like fame wise, or you could even do it in an altruistic way where like, look at all the people that I helped with donating water to, you know, and you're like, okay, that's all awesome. But it has to be God as like the premier and the prime and like the supreme. If that's like number one, then we get all kinds of cool creative liberties as to what we do next. And the fact that we get to have a relationship with him is nuts. It's not a religion where you're just like going through some worshiping exercise. You're like, we actually talk. like we're buds, you know? And then God is so cool. Like he'll take on all these other forms. Like sometimes he'll be a father. Sometimes he'll be like a nurturer, like a mother, you know, like it's all this really complex, but radically humbling truth. And I just am thrilled that you're being vocal about that and being bold about that while not pretending like you're this like goody two shoe perfect Christian that like, you know, does everything perfect. Yeah. Like, so I would just encourage you, like, stay in that space. And if people like give you shit, which they will, they cannot deny your relationship. That's like saying like, you guys aren't friends. And it's like, I know we're friends. Like, I know we're tight. You can troll all day on that, but like, you're not going to separate my belief on that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I've had some I don't know, that was another thing too. I'm like, oh God, I'm too far gone. I've done all these things, you know. And the way that Christians are portrayed through like films and stuff, it's like the girl with the Bible and like the pink cardigan buttoned up and the pigtails and like, you know, and I'm like, that is absolutely not me. But I think, just like, also, I'm just very honest too. I'm like, I'm almost through Genesis. I've got like, the Bible's almost 2,000 pages, man. Like I bought this thing and I'm like, this is long. So I'm still new to it. I'm still like, I'm vocal too about the things that I've done in my past, like through my podcasts and stuff. Cause I think it's important to just humanize ourselves. Like everyone does shit. And I think the people that pretend that they're perfect are just ignoring all of the things about themselves, and they struggle to accept those parts of themselves. And it's heavy. It's like carrying bricks in a backpack. Like you have to put the bricks down at some point. You can't just live your life hiding all this stuff and then secrets perpetuate shame. Yeah, exactly.
Do it either, because you could say like, oh, that happens, or people do that, or 58% of people. It's like, yeah, that's nice. That doesn't change the shame that I'm carrying, this burden that I'm carrying. I think for me, like, and this is probably something you could relate to, you know, the big event would be forgiveness, right? Like that's like the biggie, right? Is that Jesus died for our sins and forgives us for something that we don't deserve. And it's a really hard thing to accept, because there's nothing you can do to make God love you more, and there's nothing you can do to make God love you less. And it's just this like pure unconditional agape love. And if you do all the right things, you don't feel any better. You know what I mean? And if you do all the wrong things, you have to deal with the consequences of those. Like there's cause and effect. But for me, I could get with forgiving other people or other people forgiving me. Like that one I got pretty quickly. It was like, got this, you know, like you're forgiven. F you, you're cool. You know, and then like, okay, cool. Like I've got people forgiving me. Oh, Erica, I could not forgive myself for so long. Like I'll get emotional thinking about it. Like, and I was just like, and then I felt like, you know what? I deserve to carry this brick. Like this brick I should carry. And you know what? I can carry it because I'm pretty strong and I'll handle it. I'll just rucksack it. You know, actually it's going to make my hammies a little better. You know, like I started really thinking like, this is a good thing I'm carrying this.
Yeah.
And then I just had you have multiple encounters with God, not just the one. And when I finally forgave myself for the things that I had done and things that I had screwed up, that was just like, oh shit, you died for me to forgive myself too. You know, like, I don't know. It was like I missed that for years. You know, I wasn't even conscious to the fact that I was carrying it. So I think there's just something really beautiful and intense about that. So when you said the bricks thing, so it sounds like that's probably, I don't know. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I think this year I've just been laying them down one by one, and I'm just trying to, I think it's a process. It's not linear. Like sometimes you think you're okay, and then you're like, oh, actually, I still kind of hate myself. I need to work on this.
Like I low-key suck.
Yeah. And I think it's hard too when you put yourself out there and you're so public. I'm very public about my story, and that was the decision I made this year, was to share a lot of things about myself. And obviously, when you do that, you're going to get a lot of support, but you're also going to get some kickback, and you have to be ready to deal with that. And that was one thing that I struggled with too, is when I was doing the ayahuasca and doing these walks and therapy and business coaching and all of that, is like, okay, you need to learn to accept and love yourself and accept your past. Because if you can't, how do you expect other people to? Because they're not going to. And then when they comment and get under your skin, like it's going to be really hard for you to keep going. Like you need to be unshakable. Like if someone goes and pulls the rug from under you, like you have to be standing strong. And that's something that I'm trying to learn how to do, is just be so stable in my own self and my past, and the people that aren't here for it, then that's their decision. And I'm not here to convince anyone to, hang out with me or listen to me or like me or whatever. Like your people will come, and no new friends, unless you're good, cool and you can hang and you're imperfect as well, then we can be imperfect together. Yeah. So just be real and raw. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. I think what I've found is that when you first come in relationship with God, you're experiencing the light. It's kind of what I was aiming at saying earlier, is like you're in darkness, even if you don't realize it. And then you come into light. And that's a really great season. It's kind of like the first 90 days of dating, or, it's like the honeymoon phase. What is really hard is when you recognize that, wait, now I have to take my light back into the darkness and shine it and be like okay with the temptations, okay with the associations, because otherwise we could all, then you really do become a cult, right? You hang out within the short four walls of the church and you just church it up, you know what I mean? And be like, peace be with you. Or like, God is good all the time. God is good, and nothing is being affected in the world other than just, I hope somebody walks in today and finds this. So it sounds like God's equipping you, and you are like obviously up for it because you've put yourself out there in a way that like, you're like, I'm going to go into this world that I have experienced, and I know how empty it is. I listened to your episode about that crazy night, and I hadn't met you yet, obviously, but now having spent 90 minutes with you, it doesn't add up. Like the idea of you like snorting Ritalin at like 4 a.m. in Thailand is just like, it's like funny, and it's like sad, and it's like you. So it's this weird kind of like like your personality, I could see doing that, but like your soul, I couldn't see doing that, or your spirit. So it's like this really weird disconnect, but both of these things are true, right? And I think it's cool that you've come into relationship with God, because you're going to be able to reach people that the woman in the pink sweater just is not. They're going to be like, it looks like things just worked out for you, or like, like you got the quarterback from high school, or, or whatever. And it's just like, you've been on a journey. You've been in the darkness. Like you know what it's like. And it's fun. It actually is fun. That's the thing that happens too, is that people like become Christians and then they think that they have to knock all the other things and be like, oh, that's so gross. I can't believe I did that. And in your mind, you're like, it was a pretty dope night, actually. Like it was mad fun,
Yeah.
But then you're also looking at it differently. Like, holy shit, we could have gotten like Liam Neeson taken that night, like who knows? Yeah. And then that, I think, is where you realize like God's protecting you, man. Like he has a real plan for your life, because how many times could you have been swept up to a point of like full blown addiction or whatever? Just like there's a million ways that you would not be right here in this moment.
Yeah, for sure. I think about that often and it makes me emotional, because I just look at, and I'm sure you can relate to this. Like you maybe put yourself in dangerous situations, or just where did things in your life where you just didn't really care. And you're like, I don't really care what happens. And you just did things. And then looking back, you don't really realize how lucky you are that things didn't go a different way. Like I have a lot of gratitude for that. And, like one thing that I love and I live by is the quote, "You're most capable to help the person you used to be." And that's why I think it's so important to like share stories and experiences you've been through, because there might be someone going through that like right now and is feeling lost and doesn't know how to get out of it. Or like, I don't know. I look at a lot of these successful, quote unquote, successful entrepreneurs or people, and they're on paper like very perfect and they've achieved a lot. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of fucked up. And I don't know, are people going to love and accept me the same way? Are they going to, I don't know, like, is my success going to be discredited by all of the shit that I've done in the past? Like all of the mistakes and stuff that I've done. So I think there's like learnings in it, but then also sometimes there's just fun stories to share too. So it's like entertaining, but then also educational at the same time. Right. Yeah.
You know what else I think is hard? I don't know. This could just be me, but it's like, it's so delicate, right? Because you want to be vulnerable and authentic, and people see your like phoenix rising from the ashes story, but you also don't want that to be the thing that defines you. So it's like this really weird balance, right? Where you're going like, don't just follow or engage or connect because I was fucked up and now I'm not. I'm going to put it this way. Okay. So like I grew up in a big family, fourth of 9 children, very poor, but my parents are not low class. They're like first generation poor, and it's because they wanted to live off the land. They were like anti-conformists. So when you hear the story and the fact that before I graduated high school, I lived in 24 different houses and, didn't have electricity. But in the world, like in the community, we had all this social capital. We were awesome athletes. We were involved in our community. My family's not like the worst looking people. So like we operated quite well. And then we would come home and be like, oh, you couldn't pay the power. Like there's no heat or whatever. So we didn't grow up in a trailer park. We didn't grow up in a ghetto. We were in affluent areas around normal and successful people, and even strived in a lot of ways. So sometimes if I tell my story, it could get categorized as like, and I was the first one to go to college, and it's like, oh, really? Where'd you go? Did you go to the community college? It's like, no, I went to an Ivy League school. Fuck off. So I wrestle with like being associated with still kind of being treated like you're not a crackhead, but you're not like awesome. And it's like, so you have to somehow grapple with sharing the real deal shit, but be like, yo, I'm pretty dope. Like, don't worry about me. Like, I'm good. But then you're also like, yo, I'm not good. So it's like, it's got to be, I don't know if you can relate to any of that, but it's like you don't want to be too vulnerable. Let me put it differently. The Bible says, don't throw your pearls to the swine. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that years ago, and that really stuck with me because I went, you know what? If a person doesn't have the capacity to hear this part of my story, past, or this part of my future that I have vision for, I'm not even going to share it with them because they won't recognize that these are gems, that these are pearls, that these are rare things. So that's something that you're going to have to be super wise about, right? Because it's like, I want to be vulnerable, but I'm not going to tell you guys my shit because you can't handle it. And the comments will tell you that they can't handle it, right? So like somehow you got to thread that needle. Good luck.
Yeah.
Does that make sense though? Like I bet you like in your content and in your moments, you're like, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like dipping your toe in the water too when you're doing something new. And like, because I do like consulting for personal branding, and I have CEOs come to me and they're like, okay, like I want to put my story out there, but I want to do it this way with this like type of persona, and I can't share this because that'll look like I'm incompetent, and like I have shareholders and they'll see that and they'll be like, what a fucking idiot, like they want to have like the filtered version. So I think depending on what you're doing and what your role is, like you do have to be careful, and you do have to like know who your audience is and like so I think you can share things in an authentic way that is not like airing your dirty laundry out. Like you can do it in a tasteful way that's like, okay, this is what I did, or this is who I was, but these are the things that I learned, and I'm not perfect now, but like I did evolve, and now I'm struggling with this, or now I'm doing this, or like I think you're allowed to have breaks and succeed and have wins in your life, and not always be like playing your tiny small violin and playing victim and stuff, because there are people that do that and they use it as a weapon rather than as something to like empower others, and they weaponize it against themselves, right? So
I like how you put that. You put it better. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, it's like this kind of scarlet letter. Like I'm not like a ruined person. You know what I mean? Like I just, so it's like, broken. how do you toe that line, but not allow it to creep into your self-worth, because it takes an immense amount of confidence to be successful. And if you go too far into the past or too deep with the wrong people, like in the wrong environment, it has this effect on you where you'll go like the next 72 hours, you're like fucked up. You're like, yo, why did I share that with them? You know what I mean? And then you try to like compartmentalize it, like, because I'm so vulnerable. It's like I'm so authentic, and you're like, oh, you threw pearls to the swine. Like you
didn't read the room.
Yeah, read the room, bro. Like those people can't handle that shit. So that's something that I think is like really sophisticated in like personal storytelling. That is super hard, and I think it's that dilution, right? Where it's like, okay, maybe there's 3 posts that are like, I'm killing it. You know what I mean? And then you're like, but like, it's mad hard, right? They're like, this is my shit. And then you're like, I'm killing it. Because I think people go way too vulnerable. And I don't mean because like people judge them. Who cares? But like, it'll mess you up. You know what I mean? Where then you're just sitting in your shit and going like, I can't even today.
Yeah. You definitely have to be like I said, like unshakable. And I think be in a place, like if you're comfortable sharing something, you have to be ready to get all of the shit back from it. And there's been times where I put stuff out and I'm like, I don't really know. This is like kind of intense, but some of it's been received very well. And then there's been times where I'm like very confident. I put something out and I'm like, this was not received as well as I thought it would have been. So I think it's like a lot of trial and error too. Like even, celebrities with like PR teams and have like a whole crew putting out like Jaguar, their new cars and their commercial, like, like that's kind of different, but you know what I mean? Like sometimes you just make mistakes, and it's marketing in a way too with a platform, like your own product, and you're vouching for yourself and putting your story out there. So sometimes it's hard when it's just you and you're like, okay, what should I talk about? What should I put out? I don't know. Like, can be confusing.
It sounds like you're learning from the first go round and really building more of a community versus like siloing yourself and just grinding. That sounds like a lot wiser of a move for sustainability.
Yeah, I think so. And I also just like fully don't really know what I'm doing with my life right now.
Right, which is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is beautiful. Like it's a transition season, and everyone's like, oh wow, it's so fresh. Like you just filed bankruptcy, and I'm like, well, I'm out of bankruptcy period at like December 28th or whatever. Like on paper, you can't make above like 2,500 net a month. It's like they want you to struggle, man. Like it's hard.
They don't pay your dues or your
There's a whole
sentences.
yeah, and you have to pay to file bankruptcy, which is like so ironic because you have literally no money. It's like, where
But
am I
you get
supposed
like
to?
this restart, right? And then it's like
Yeah,
7 years of
it's a
tribulation.
clean slate. Yeah, it's a clean slate. And honestly,
Well,
it's
look at
fine.
that too. I mean, relative to the way that you're experiencing God, I mean, you're doing like a full reset financially.
I know. I hit the button and it's the new year. So I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm going to move somewhere new. It's going to be a clean slate. But yeah, it can be heavy. A lot of things all happening at once. But yeah.
That's cool. That's awesome. I know we're kind of rounding third base. I've enjoyed talking with you this morning. There's one other thought on my mind with this brand, because I think it'll be a fun, I don't mean for everything to be such a grapple, but I love the message, you are not a bad person. Mm-hmm. And it has in it this, like, nobody knows the real answer, but I thought about it in just preparing to talk to you, because it's like both of these things are true, in that we are born with sin and are cursed. So on one hand, we are bad people. And it's like, how do you reckon with the series of contrasts that you are a bad person. I am a bad person. Like, we default to bad. Like, I have 5 children. Trust me. Like, they are bad as much as they are good, but they're so good, at the same time. And I think Luke Bryan has a song, I know you're in the epicenter there in Austin, that, most people are good. And it's true. Like, most people are not murderers. Most people are not racists. Most people are not bigots. So I think it's really cool that you're choosing to proclaim and declare and like speak life into people and say, like, you're not a bad person. And knowing that, the Lord, it's like, has this underpinning of, but like, you're a bad person. So am I. So like, let's talk about this. I don't know if you've thought about that at all, or if you've like, processed that. And that's just like my take on it, obviously. But I just found that kind of interesting. I mean, it would be really bad if like I said, your podcast was, you're a bad person, right? But there's almost this like awareness that you have to have that says like, yo, we naturally fuck up. Like, so I just think it's cool what you're doing in that vein. And I was curious if you'd thought about that at all.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have. And I think like with the whole podcast and the theme of the podcast, my goal was like, I have a very controversial past, and like I've held so much shame. Like, I think we all can accept that we do bad things, or we do things that are like quote unquote bad, or, like, and things that are stigmatized, or things. Yeah. Right. We all sin. We're a bunch of sinners. Right. But I think people label themselves as bad, and then they have like there's shame, and there's all these other feelings that kind of string off of that, and that label is just, and I've heard it over and over and over again, like, and I was trying to come up with a podcast name, and I'm like, what should I call this podcast? And then I remember I was talking to my roommate in the kitchen one day, and I was like, am I a bad person? I was like, you're not a bad person. You're not. That's it. That's definitely it. Because we were talking about different things. I think dating stories or something. And then I watched a Netflix show, and she's like, this girl asked her sister, she's like, am I a bad person? And I think so many people like have asked themselves that, like we ask and we feel that way. And I don't know. I wanted to create this space where people can feel like like, yeah, I fuck up and that's fine, but it doesn't make me a bad person. And I don't have to feel all this heavy stuff and shame and guilt around the things that I've done, because everyone does it. Everyone's bad, but it doesn't make you a bad person. So
right.
yeah, I think that's where it kind of came from. And it's just also like an outlet for me. Like, I love having a place to talk about things. Like, sometimes I have like an aha moment, or like in my sleep lately, I've had like these dreams and I pull my phone out and I have my notes and I'm just like, this, I need to talk about this.
Like,
and then I wake up and I'm
from
like,
now, this is perfect.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, the podcast is fun, but
yeah. I think you're a natural, like from the standpoint of being a creative, and it'll be fun to watch how things unfold, because you have the gift that is like most valuable in business. You just have to put the second part together, like you said, the ops, the infrastructure, and you want to own as much of it as you can. But the world's changed, man. Like,
yeah,
attention is the new oil, right? So like, in a way, if you can garner attention, I was talking to my team about this, and I was joking as much as I could, but I was like, look, guys, this is good news, because as the attention seeking whore that I am, I was like, you guys are going to be able to leverage, all the attention that we'll garner. But it's like, that seemed like that was more of the value that you brought with your food business, right? Because it wasn't so much about the product. I mean, it was, I'm sure it tasted great and did all the things, and it was like good bro dough, but it was you leading with who that has attracted the following. And you also have to be polarizing enough that people give a shit, because if you're just like, there's no controversy, there's no like edge, then people are like, you're just like a normal person. Like, I don't really want to watch you. Like, so I think you got it, and now it'll be fun to watch how you infuse this new faith walk, keep your edge, because that's you, and you've always been that way. And that's where that creator comes in, because it's like, if you want to know how the iPhone works, I would talk to Apple about it, right? So it's like this, like, hey, God, why did you make me this way, man? Like, why do I have these qualities, these characteristics, these faculties? So it's fun to watch you kind of figure it out. And I think you have a lot more of a handle on it than you probably give off, but you're also deciding at the cusp of 30, I don't want to live for myself. Like, I don't want to just be the main event. So it'll be fun to watch you figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't know.
I'm a fan. I'm here for it.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'm just trusting in the process and letting go and unlocking all the doors to the room. So that's what the next few months are going to be for me, is just letting go and trusting.
That's cool. Yeah. And you have your early adopters. You have the people that are ride or dies that say, like, I'm with Erica because of Erica, not because of the products that she endorses.
Cookie dough, yeah.
Like, I doubt, it'd be really weird if someone's like, I don't fuck with her, dude. Like, I'm all about the cookie dough. Like, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm glad I got to hang out with you and have a conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun to just grapple with all the things. So I'm told that there's supposed to be like a call to action. It's not really my style, because I like to just hang out and talk. But is there anything that I can help you with, or that any of our listeners, like, obviously following you and gassing you up every time you post?
Yeah, if you want to support, I mean, I don't know where your audience hangs out, but I'm on LinkedIn, Erica Rankin, and then my podcast, You're Not a Bad Person. If you want some unhinged stories, I have them over there. So yeah, no judgment zone.